General Korax had conquered 17 star systems. He had obliterated entire fleets with nothing more than a casual flick of his tentacle. He had made warrior races bow before his superior intellect and firepower. But right now, staring at this single human female in her ridiculous black mask, he felt something he hadn't experienced in 300 cycles. Confusion. "Remove the facial covering." "Primitive," Korax commanded, his 4 eyes narrowing to dangerous slits. His voice boomed through the detention chamber, causing the metal walls to vibrate with authority. The human didn't even flinch. She sat there on the cold floor, legs crossed like she was at some sort of meditation retreat, instead of facing interrogation from the most feared military commander in the Galactic Union. Her mask was simple, matte black, covering everything from her nose up. Only her mouth and chin were visible, and right now, those lips were curved into what Korax was beginning to recognize as a very irritating smile. "Yeah, no thanks," she said, her voice carrying a casual tone that made Korax's blood pressure spike. "Trust me, big guy. Nobody wants to see what's under here." Korax slammed his massive fist against the interrogation table, sending cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. "Do you comprehend the severity of your situation, human? Your pathetic little vessel was caught smuggling weapons-grade plutonium through restricted space. Your crew is dead. You are the sole survivor, and I will extract every piece of information from that inferior brain of yours." Weapons-grade plutonium? The human actually had the audacity to laugh. "Oh, that's rich. Is that what your scanners told you? Your tech boys might want to recalibrate their equipment, because that wasn't plutonium." The general's confidence wavered for just a microsecond. His science officer, Lieutenant Vex, had been absolutely certain about the readings. The entire boarding operation had been based on those scans. "Explain." "Well, since you asked so nicely," the human said, stretching her arms above her head like she was getting comfortable. "That was actually my lunch. Tuna sandwich with extra mayo. Though I guess after 3 days in space, without proper refrigeration, it might qualify as a biological weapon." Korax stared at her. In all his years of conquest and interrogation, no prisoner had ever made jokes about decomposing fish products. "You mock me." "Little bit, yeah." She tilted her head, and somehow that simple gesture made the mask seem even more mysterious. "Look, General Korax. It is Korax, right? The whole feared throughout the galaxy thing? I gotta say, the reputation's a bit oversold." Heat rose in Korax's chest. No one, absolutely no one, had ever questioned his reputation to his face. "I have crushed civilizations that were ancient when your species was still learning to make fire. And yet here you are, getting worked up over one human with a fashion accessory." She gestured to her mask. "Kind of makes you wonder about those other civilizations, doesn't it? Maybe they just got tired of dealing with temper tantrums." The interrogation room fell silent, except for the low hum of the ship's engines and Korax's increasingly heavy breathing. His tactical mind, the one that had outmaneuvered countless enemies, was trying to process this situation. Every instinct screamed that this human was dangerous, but she appeared completely helpless. No weapons, no armor, just simple civilian clothes, and that infuriating mask. "Your psychological warfare tactics are primitive," Korax finally said, though he couldn't quite convince himself that's all this was. "Psychological warfare?" The human laughed again, and this time Korax noticed something odd. The sound seemed to echo strangely in the chamber, lasting just a fraction longer than it should. "Oh, honey, if I wanted to mess with your head, I'd have started with pointing out that your supposedly impenetrable battlecruiser has a structural weakness, Index 7. Section 12. You know, where you cut corners on the hull plating to save costs?" Korax felt his heart skip a beat. That information was classified at the highest levels. Only he and the ship's chief engineer knew about that particular cost-cutting measure. "How could you possibly know that?" "Lucky guess?" She shrugged. Or maybe I just pay attention. Your ship's got a slight list to starboard, probably 0.03 degrees. Most people wouldn't notice, but it tells a story about uneven weight distribution. Combined with the resonance frequency I'm hearing in the engines, and the fact that your artificial gravity feels about 5% weaker in this section, well, it paints a picture. The General's confidence was now officially shaken. This human had analyzed his ship's structural integrity while being dragged through it as a prisoner. Either she was some kind of engineering savant, or she was far more dangerous than she appeared. "Remove the mask," he said again, but this time his voice lacked its earlier authority. "I already told you, that's not happening." Her tone remained light, almost cheerful. "See? This little face covering isn't just a fashion statement. It's more like a safety feature." "Safety for whom?" "For everyone." The humor drained from her voice, leaving something cold and hard in its place. "Including you, General. Especially you." Korax studied her more carefully now. The human female appeared to be in her mid-30s by their species standards. Average height, lean build, unremarkable except for her apparent immunity to intimidation and that damned mask. But as he watched, he began to notice other details. The way she sat perfectly still, like a predator, conserving energy. The way her head occasionally tilted, as if she was listening to something he couldn't hear. And most unsettling of all, the way she seemed to be studying him right back. "You're afraid of what's underneath," he said, testing a theory. "Terrified," she agreed readily, "but not in the way you think." "Then explain it to me, human. Make me understand why a simple piece of cloth is so important that you'd rather face torture than remove it." She was quiet for so long that Korax began to think she wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "Have you ever heard of Pandora's box, General? Ancient human mythology? A container that, once opened, released all the evils of the world." Close enough. She looked up at him, and even through the mask, he could feel the weight of her gaze. "The thing about Pandora's box is that everyone focuses on what came out of it. Plague, war, famine, death. All the terrible things that humanity had to learn to live with. But they always forget the most important part of the story." "Which is?" Hope stayed inside. Her smile returned, but this time it held no warmth at all. "The question is, what happens when someone makes a box designed to keep hope in and everything else out?" Korax felt a chill run down his spine. "That makes no sense, doesn't it?" She stood up slowly, moving with a fluid grace that made his hand instinctively move toward his sidearm. "See, General, my people have this funny habit of taking things too far. We build weapons that can crack planets, create plagues that could wipe out star systems, develop technologies that make gods weep. And sometimes, just sometimes, we build things that are designed to contain all of that destructive potential in one small, fragile package." The General's 4 eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. "You're saying the mask contains something?" "I'm saying the mask contains me." Her voice was still casual, conversational, like she was discussing the weather, instead of what was sounding more and more like a doomsday scenario. "More specifically, it contains what I become when people see my face. That's impossible. No technology could work in such a manner." "Oh, it's not technology," she said, moving closer to the interrogation table. Korax found himself taking an involuntary step backward. "It's much older than that, much simpler, and infinitely more dangerous." The General's tactical computer was running probability scenarios in his head, and none of them were coming back positive. If this human was telling the truth, then removing her mask could potentially result in casualties. If she was lying, then she was doing it with such conviction that even his psychological training couldn't detect deception. Either way, he was beginning to think this interrogation was going in the wrong direction. "You're bluffing," he said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. Maybe, she agreed. There's really only one way to find out, isn't there? Korax stared at her, his mind racing. In 3 centuries of military service, he had never encountered a prisoner who seemed so genuinely unconcerned about their own fate. Most beings, when faced with his reputation and the reality of capture, either broke down in terror or flew into desperate rage. This human was doing neither. She was simply waiting. "What's your name?" he asked suddenly. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She considered this for a moment. "Maya Torres. Captain Maya Torres, technically, though I guess my ship's kind of out of commission right now." "Captain Torres," Korax said, the title feeling strange on his tongue when applied to a human. "What were you really transporting in that cargo hold?" "I told you. A sandwich." "The truth, Captain." Maya was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made the air in the room feel heavier. "The truth is, General, I was transporting myself. Everything else on that ship, including the crew you killed, was just window dressing." "You're claiming you're some sort of weapon?" "I'm claiming I'm some sort of mistake." She moved to the far wall and leaned against it, putting as much distance between them as the small room allowed. "See, about 50 years ago, Earth's military decided they wanted to create the perfect soldier. Someone who could walk into any situation and come out victorious, no matter the odds." Korax felt his skin crawl. Genetic modification. Among other things. They tried everything. Enhanced reflexes, improved strength, accelerated healing, tactical processing enhancement, but none of it was enough. Wars kept getting more complex, enemies kept getting more dangerous, so they decided to think outside the box. What did they do? Maya's smile turned sad. They decided that the most dangerous human wasn't one who was stronger or faster or smarter. It was one who could make other people want to follow them, no matter what. One who could inspire absolute loyalty, unquestioning devotion, and complete trust with nothing more than a look. The general's blood ran cold. Pheromone manipulation? Deeper than that. Neurological manipulation. Subliminal psychological triggers. Empathic projection. They wanted to create someone who could walk into an enemy command center and make every single person in that room believe that their greatest desire was to serve her. And they succeeded. Oh, they succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Maya's voice was barely audible now. They created someone who could end wars without firing a shot, who could turn entire populations into willing slaves, who could make anyone do anything, simply by letting them see her face. Korax realized his hands were shaking. "What happened to the project?" "What do you think happened?" Maya asked. "The first time they tested it, half the research team immediately tried to kill the other half to prove their loyalty to me. The ones who survived started a cult. Within 6 months, 3 different governments had fallen and been replaced by regimes dedicated to finding me and bringing me home to rule them. How did you escape?" "I didn't." Maya touched the edge of her mask with one finger. "This was their solution. A containment device that blocks whatever it is they did to me. As long as I keep it on, I'm just another human being. The moment it comes off, everyone who sees your face becomes your devoted follower." Korax finished. "Everyone," Maya confirmed. "Human, alien, artificial intelligence, doesn't matter. Something about the way they modified me transcends species barriers. The few times it's accidentally come loose, the results have been catastrophic." The room fell silent again. Korax found himself backing toward the door without realizing it. His rational mind was telling him this was all an elaborate hoax, but his survival instincts, the ones that had kept him alive through 3 centuries of warfare, were screaming at him to get as far away from this human as possible. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked. "Because you're going to keep trying to remove the mask," Maya said, simply. "And because when you do, I want you to understand what you'll be unleashing. Not just on your crew, not just on your ship, but on every single being in this sector of space. I could simply execute you. You could try. Maya's voice held no threat, just a statement of fact. But the mask has other built-in safety features. Let's just say that the people who designed it really didn't want it coming off under any circumstances. Korax's hand moved to his weapon, then stopped. Every tactical instinct he possessed was telling him that this human was the most dangerous being he had ever encountered. But she hadn't threatened him, hadn't tried to escape, hadn't even asked for her freedom. She was just sitting there, warning him about what would happen if he did what every fiber of his being was telling him he should never, under any circumstances, actually do. "This is insane," he said finally. "Welcome to dealing with humans," Maya replied. "We're not known for our restraint or our good decision-making. On the bright side, we're usually pretty entertaining right up until we accidentally destroy everything we care about." The general stared at her for a long moment, then activated his comm unit. "Lieutenant Vex, report to Detention Bay 7 immediately." "Yes, sir," came the crisp reply. Korax looked back at Maya, who was watching him with obvious curiosity. "I'm going to verify your story." "Good idea," she said. "But be careful how you do it. Some information comes with a price." Lieutenant Vex arrived within minutes, his blue-scaled hide gleaming under the detention bay's harsh lighting. The young officer's reptilian features showed the kind of eager efficiency that Korax usually appreciated. Today, it made him nervous. "Sir, you requested my presence?" Vex's forked tongue flicked out, tasting the air. His species had evolved from predators, and they possessed an uncanny ability to sense emotional states through chemical markers. "I need you to run a deep scan on our prisoner's background," Korax said, keeping his voice steady. "Full military records, genetic markers, anything you can find about experimental programs from Earth's recent history." Vex's golden eyes flicked toward Maya, who gave him a cheerful little wave. "Of course, sir. Though I should mention, the human seems remarkably calm for someone in her position." "Yeah, I get that a lot," Maya said conversationally. "People always expect prisoners to be more prisoner-like. Personally, I think panic is overrated. Plus, your general here has been surprisingly polite. Most alien warlords skip straight to the torture." Vex looked confused. "Alien warlords? That's what you are, right?" Maya asked Korax directly. "I mean, the whole conquered 17 star systems thing is pretty much the textbook definition." "I am a military commander serving the Galactic Union," Korax replied stiffly. "Sure. And I'm sure all those conquered civilizations had a vote in joining your union." Maya's tone remained light, but there was steel underneath it now. "Tell me, General, when you liberate a planet, do you usually kill this many of the locals, or was my crew special?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Vex's scales actually shifted color, darkening in what Korax recognized as a threat display. But the young officer wasn't reacting to Maya's words. He was reacting to something else entirely. "Sir," Vex said slowly, "I'm detecting some very unusual pheromone signatures from the prisoner." Maya sighed. "And here we go." "Explain," Korax ordered, though part of him really didn't want to know. "The chemical markers are contradictory," Vex said, his scientific training warring with obvious confusion. "She's producing compounds associated with extreme confidence, but also deep sadness. Alpha dominance patterns mixed with protective instincts. And underneath all of that," he paused, his tongue flicking out again. "Fear. Not fear of us, sir. Fear for us." "Bingo," Maya said quietly. "Your boy's got a good nose." Korax felt his heart sink. If Vex could detect chemical evidence supporting Maya's story, then this situation had just become infinitely more dangerous. "Lieutenant, I want you to access Earth's classified military databases. Look for any references to Project Pandora, neurological enhancement programs, or... He glanced at Maya, who nodded encouragingly, or anything involving the creation of individuals with enhanced charismatic abilities. Sir, accessing classified alien databases without proper authorization is, Vex began, is exactly what you're going to do because I'm ordering you to, Korax snapped. And, Lieutenant, do it from outside this room. Vex hesitated for a moment, clearly wanting to ask questions, but military discipline won out. Yes, sir. He cast one last curious look at Maya before leaving. Once they were alone again, Korax found himself studying the human with new eyes. If her story was true, then she represented a threat unlike anything he had ever encountered. Not a weapon that could destroy ships or planets, but something far more insidious, something that could destroy the very concept of free will. You're thinking too hard, Maya observed. I can practically hear the gears turning. I'm trying to determine if you're the most dangerous prisoner I've ever taken, or the most elaborate liar. Why not both? Maya stood and began pacing the small confines of the detention cell. You know what the really messed up part is? They didn't even intend for this to happen. The original project was supposed to create someone with enhanced leadership abilities, better at reading people, more persuasive in negotiations, able to inspire troops under impossible odds. Standard military enhancement stuff. What went wrong? What always goes wrong with human military projects, Maya said with a bitter laugh. They got greedy. The initial results were promising. I could read micro-expressions, detect lies, inspire confidence in my subordinates. So naturally, they decided to push harder. Korax watched her pace, noting the fluid way she moved. Even her walking seemed calculated to avoid appearing threatening while maintaining perfect awareness of her surroundings. They increased the modifications. They cranked everything up to 11. Enhanced empathy became emotional manipulation. Leadership skills became compulsive charisma. The ability to inspire became the ability to dominate. And then, Maya stopped pacing and turned to face him directly. Then they discovered that whatever they had done to me was contagious. Contagious? Not in the traditional sense, but prolonged exposure to me, even with the mask, starts to have effects. People begin to trust me more than they should. They start valuing my opinion over their own judgment. Given enough time, they'd do anything I asked, just because I was the one asking. Korax felt a chill run through him. How long? Depends on the individual. Stronger minds take longer. Military training helps. But eventually, she shrugged. Eventually, everyone breaks. Everyone, except me. The mask prevents this? The mask slows it down to a manageable level. Face-to-face contact without the mask? That's instant conversion, complete and permanent. But even with it, Maya gestured around the detention cell. How long have we been talking, General? 20 minutes? 30? Tell me honestly, are you starting to like me more than you should? The question hit Korax like a physical blow, because the answer was yes. Despite everything she had told him, despite the threat she potentially represented, he found himself genuinely concerned about her well-being. When had that started? When had his interrogation of a prisoner become something that felt almost like a conversation between equals? This is impossible, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? You're a military commander. You've spent centuries learning to read people, to inspire loyalty, to make split-second decisions about who to trust. Now imagine meeting someone who does all of that better than you ever could without even trying. Maya's voice was gentle now, almost sad. Your instincts are telling you I'm trustworthy because that's exactly what I was designed to make you feel. The detention bay's door chimed, and Vex returned. His scales had shifted to a pale green that Korax didn't recognize. Sir, I've completed the database search. And? Project Pandora was real, sir. Classified at the highest levels, but the records are there. Earth's military did attempt to create enhanced soldiers with neurological modifications. The project was terminated 53 years ago after what the files describe as a catastrophic containment failure. Maya winced. They make it sound so clinical. According to the records, Vex continued, test subject designated Pandora 7 was responsible for the deaths of 47 researchers and military personnel, not through violence, but through what the reports call loyalty conflicts. Personnel began fighting each other to prove their devotion to the subject. Pandora 7, Korax repeated, looking at Maya. That's you. That's me, she confirmed. Though I prefer Maya. Pandora 7 makes me sound like a software update. Vex's tongue flicked out again, and his scales shifted to an even paler shade. Sir, there's more. The files indicate that Pandora 7 was never captured or killed. She simply disappeared, along with several high-ranking military officials who were supposedly hunting her. They didn't disappear, Maya said quietly. They joined me, not by choice. Never by choice. She sat back down, suddenly looking much older than her apparent years. Do you want to know the real reason I wear the mask, General? It's not to protect everyone else from what I am. It's to protect me from what I do to them. Korax felt his worldview shifting in ways that made him profoundly uncomfortable. Explain. When someone falls under my influence, they don't stop being themselves immediately. It's gradual. They start agreeing with me more, trusting my judgment, putting my needs before their own. And at first, it feels good, natural, like they're finally seeing things clearly. Maya's voice was barely above a whisper now, but eventually, they lose everything that made them who they were. They become hollow copies of themselves, existing only to serve me. And, the worst part? They're happy about it. The detention cell fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's life support systems. Korax found himself trying to analyze his own thoughts, searching for signs that his judgment had been compromised. The problem was, he couldn't tell if his growing sympathy for Maya was genuine concern or artificial compulsion. The officials who disappeared with you, he said, finally. What happened to them? They're still with me. Sort of. Maya touched her mask absently. There's a facility, hidden in the outer rim. They take care of it, maintain it, keep it running. They think they're protecting me, but really, they're protecting everyone else. Every few years, I have to move, find a new hiding place, because someone always figures out where I am eventually. And that's what you were doing? Running? Always running, Maya confirmed. The galaxy's a big place, but it's not big enough to hide forever, especially not when governments keep building better tracking technology. Vex suddenly straightened, his scales flushing bright red. Sir, we have a problem. What kind of problem, Lieutenant? I've been monitoring communications while running the database searches. Word has gotten out about our prisoner. The Galactic Council is demanding her immediate transfer to a maximum security facility. Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. Oh, this keeps getting better. What's so amusing? Korax demanded. Maximum security facility, Maya repeated. Do you have any idea what happens when you put someone with my particular abilities in a confined space with hundreds of guards, administrators, and support staff? The implications hit Korax like a meteor strike. You'd convert the entire facility. Within days, maybe hours, depending on how curious they get about what's under the mask. Maya stood up again, and this time, her movement carried a subtle urgency. General, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You cannot turn me over to the Council. I follow orders, human. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Maya said firmly. That's the one thing they couldn't take away from me, no matter how hard they tried. Free will always exists, even when it's buried under layers of compulsion and artificial loyalty. Vex's communicator chimed. Sir, incoming transmission from Admiral Thex. Priority. Alpha. Korax grimaced. Admiral Thex was his immediate superior, and not someone who tolerated delays or excuses. Put it through to the main screen. The detention cell's wall display activated, showing the stern visage of Admiral Thex. The Valdorian's 6 eyes focused immediately on Maya, and Korax saw them widen with what might have been recognition. General Korax. Thex's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. You will prepare the prisoner for immediate transfer to council custody. A diplomatic vessel is en route to your position. Admiral, with respect, I believe the prisoner may pose a significant security risk that requires— The prisoner, Thex interrupted, is far too dangerous to remain in the custody of a single battle cruiser. The Council has facilities specifically designed for individuals of her unique nature. Maya stepped forward, moving into the communication pickup's range. Hello, Admiral. Long time no see. Thex's reaction was immediate and telling. All 6 eyes locked onto Maya's masked face, and his usual military bearing seemed to soften around the edges. Captain Torres, I had wondered if we would meet again. Korax felt the bottom drop out of his universe. You know each other? The Admiral and I crossed paths about 15 years ago, Maya explained, her voice carefully neutral. Didn't we, Thex? It was. An educational experience, Thex replied, and Korax noticed that the Admiral's tone had become almost conversational. Not quite friendly, but lacking the cold formality he usually maintained. Educational? Maya repeated. Is that what you're calling it now, Admiral? Korax said urgently. I believe the prisoner has been using psychological manipulation techniques. You may be compromised. Thex's eyes snapped back to Korax, and for a moment, his usual cold authority returned. Nonsense, General. My interaction with Captain Torres was brief and occurred under controlled conditions. But, even as he said, Korax could see uncertainty flickering in the Admiral's expression. Maya sighed. 15 years, Admiral. You've been thinking about our conversation for 15 years. Tell me honestly, how often do you remember the exact words of a 5-minute meeting with a prisoner? Vex was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. Every day. That's what I was afraid of, Maya said sadly. The influence doesn't fade, Admiral. It just goes dormant. And every time you think about me, every time you remember our meeting, it gets a little stronger. Korax watched in horror as understanding dawned in Thex's expression. The Admiral's 6 eyes were locked on Maya's masked face with an intensity that was definitely not normal military protocol. The Council facility, Thex said slowly. It's not designed to contain you. It's designed to study you. Bingo, Maya said. And what do you think happens when a couple dozen of the galaxy's best scientists start running experiments on someone like me? They fall under your influence, Korax answered, the full scope of the disaster finally becoming clear. And then they start sharing their research with colleagues, Maya continued, who share it with their colleagues, who share it with government officials, who share it with military commanders. She looked directly at the communication pickup. How many people do you think the Council could convert before they realized what was happening? Thex's face had gone pale. Millions. Billions. Conservative estimate, Maya agreed. The reality is, once I'm in Council custody, it's game over for free will in this galaxy. Everyone becomes part of my network, whether they want to or not, whether I want them to or not. The communication channel fell silent. Korax could practically see Thex's military mind working through the implications, fighting against whatever influence Maya had exerted 15 years ago. Finally, Thex spoke. General Korax, you will delay the prisoner transfer until further notice. Technical difficulties with your communication systems. Sir? You heard me, General. Whatever it takes to buy us time while I figure out how to handle this situation without ending civilization as we know it. The channel closed, leaving Korax alone with Vex and Maya. The detention cell felt smaller somehow, as if the weight of what they had just learned was pressing in on all sides. "So, what now?" Vex asked quietly. Maya looked at both of them, and even through the mask, Korax could feel the weight of her attention. "Now you have a choice to make, General. You can follow your orders, turn me over to the Council, and watch as everything you've spent your life protecting crumbles around you. Or you can help me disappear. Again. Find me a ship, point me toward the outer rim, and forget this conversation ever happened." Maya's voice was soft, but it carried absolute certainty. "I know it's not an easy choice. I know it goes against everything you believe in. But sometimes, the right thing to do isn't the legal thing to do." Korax stared at her, his military training warring with the growing certainty that she was right. And if I refuse?" "Then you refuse," Maya said simply. "I won't compel you, General. I won't use my abilities to force your cooperation. If you decide to follow orders, I'll accept the consequences. Even though it means the end of free will? Even then." Maya's smile was sad but genuine. "Because the moment I start forcing people to make the choices I want them to make, I become everything they designed me to be, and I'd rather die than let that happen." The detention cell fell silent once more. Korax found himself at the crossroads of the most important decision of his long military career: follow orders and potentially doom the galaxy, or commit treason to save it. He looked at Vex, who was watching him with obvious concern. He thought about his crew, his ship, the civilizations he had sworn to protect. And he thought about Maya, sitting calmly in her cell, willing to sacrifice herself rather than compromise the free will of others. How long would it take to prep a fast courier ship for departure? Vex's scales brightened to a pleased green. 20 minutes, sir. Do it." Korax turned back to Maya, who was watching him with what might have been relief. "Captain Torres, it seems you have a ship to catch." "Thank you," Maya said quietly. "I know what this costs you." "The price of doing the right thing is always higher than we expect," Korax replied. "But it's a price worth paying." As Vex hurried out to prep the courier ship, Korax found himself alone with the most dangerous woman in the galaxy, a woman who had just proven that even in the darkest circumstances, free will could triumph over compulsion. "For what it's worth," Maya said, as she stood to follow him out of the detention cell, "you would have made the right choice even without my influence. I can sense these things. And you, General Korax, are a good man." "How can you be sure?" Maya paused at the door, her hand resting on the frame. "Because good men always ask that question. Bad ones never do." And with that, she walked out of the detention cell and toward whatever uncertain future awaited her in the vast darkness between the stars. Behind her, General Korax stood alone, knowing that he had just made the most important decision of his life, and hoping against hope that it had been the right one. The galaxy was safe, for now, but Maya Torres would keep running, keep hiding, carrying her dangerous gift like a burden too heavy for any one person to bear. And somewhere in the outer rim, she would continue to fight the most important war of all, the war to remain human in a universe that had tried to make her something else entirely.